The steel bridge stretched like a death trap across the canyon, its narrow frame trembling under torrential rain. Thunder crashed overhead while wind howled through the mountains like the screams of the damned. 8 Navy SEALs pressed their backs against the bridge's edge, hundreds of enemy fighters flooding toward them from both ends. Commander William Harrison gripped his radio with white knuckles static crackling through the storm. No backup, no escape routes, no hope. The rain beat against his face, washing away the blood from a shrapnel cut above his eye. 20 years in special operations had taught him to recognize death when it stared him in the face. This was it. Behind them, a 1,000-foot drop into darkness. Ahead, certain death. Private Johnson's voice cracked through chattering teeth. "This is our grave, sir." The words hung in the air between thunderclaps, a truth no one wanted to acknowledge. The SEALs had walked into a trap. What intelligence had predicted as 30 hostiles had turned out to be over 200 well-armed fighters with heavy machine guns, RPGs, and strategic positions throughout the canyon walls. Sergeant Scott Davidson checked his ammunition with mechanical precision. 3 magazines left. Not enough. Never enough. His weathered face betrayed no fear, only the calm acceptance of a man who had always known his end would come in some forgotten corner of the world. "Sir," Davidson said, his voice barely audible above the storm, "we need options." Harrison scanned the bridge one more time. On their left, the canyon wall rose like a black curtain. On the right, nothing but air and a long fall into oblivion. The bridge itself offered minimal cover from the increasing gunfire that sparked and ricocheted off metal supports. Through night vision goggles, Harrison could see the enemy commander at the far end of the bridge. A tall figure in tactical gear arm raised to signal the final assault. In 30 seconds, his fighters would rush from both sides. It would be over in minutes. Time slowed to a crawl. Harrison thought of his wife back home, the son who might grow up without a father. He thought of the men beside him, the best America had to offer, about to deal in an ambush that should have been predicted, should have been prevented. Private Johnson closed his eyes, lips moving in silent prayer. Corporal Williams dragged their wounded medic Davis behind a concrete barrier, but they all knew it was just postponing the inevitable. Then, cutting through the chaos like divine intervention, crack! A single sniper shot split the night, its sound distinctive and unmistakable to any soldier who had served in combat zones. The Barrett .50 caliber rifle had a voice all its own, a thunderous roar that could be heard for miles. Through his night vision, Harrison watched as the enemy commander's head snapped back with shocking violence. The man's raised arm dropped limp at his side as he collapsed to the ground. For one impossible heartbeat, the entire battlefield fell silent. 200 fighters froze in confusion. 8 SEALs stared in disbelief. Even the storm seemed to pause. Then chaos erupted again, but everything had changed. "Who the hell fired that shot?" Davidson whispered, scanning the darkness. "And from where?" Harrison shook his head, equally baffled. None of his men carried a 50 cal sniper rifle. This shot had come from somewhere else, from someone else. Someone who had just changed the course of the battle. Someone who had just given them a chance to survive. 3 months earlier, forward operating base Horizon stood like a dusty fortress in the Afghan mountains. Morning formations cast long shadows across the compound as the sun climbed over jagged peaks in the distance. The rhythmic cadence of running boots echoed off concrete barriers as Navy SEALs conducted their daily training routines. In the supply depot, far from the glamour of the combat teams, Alexa Reyes moved like a ghost. 5'2", barely 100 pounds, with short black hair and eyes that studied the ground rather than meet anyone's gaze. She counted medical supplies, inventoried ammunition, and served meals in the mess hall. Among the warriors of Phobie Horizon, she was known simply as the logistics girl. Alexa stacked boxes of medical gauze with practiced efficiency, placing each one with almost mathematical precision. Her small hands moved quickly, checking items against her clipboard before marking them as received. To anyone watching, she was just another support staff member, invisible, forgettable part of the background machinery that kept the base functioning. "Hey, doc lady!" The voice boomed across the supply room, startling her despite its familiarity. Sergeant Scott Davidson stood in the doorway, his 6-foot frame blocking most of the light, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Got those rifle cleaning kits we requested last week? Or are you still learning how to read supply forms?" 3 SEALs behind him chuckled to sound cold and dismissive. Davidson, 38 years old with 2 tours in Iraq and the scars to prove it, had made Alexa a regular target for his particular brand of humor since she arrived at FOB Horizon. "Yes, Sergeant," Alexa replied softly, her voice barely audible. "They came in yesterday. I logged them and set them aside for your team." She reached under her desk and pulled out a box, placing it on the counter without making eye contact. Davidson picked up the package, inspecting it with exaggerated care. "Well, would you look at that? The logistics girl actually got something right." He turned to his team. "Mark the calendar, boys. Might not happen again this deployment." More laughter. Alexa kept her eyes fixed on her clipboard, her face an emotionless mask that revealed nothing of the thoughts behind it. "Maybe stick to bandaging boo-boos instead of pretending you know about real weapons," one of the other SEALs called out. "Leave the fighting to the fighter, sweetheart." Davidson tossed the box to one of his men. "Make sure these get to the armory. We've got range qualification tomorrow, and I'm not failing because of dirty barrels." He turned back to Alexa, his expression softening just slightly. "Thanks for the kits. Try not to mess up the next order, okay?" They left as quickly as they had arrived, their laughter echoing down the hallway. Alexa remained motionless until the sound faded completely. Then, with deliberate care, she reached for her pen and made a small note in the margins of her inventory sheet. "Davidson. Favors his right side. Slight trigger delay. Blinks before firing." The note joined dozens of similar observations hidden among supply numbers and stock codes. Details no one would notice. Details no one would think to look for. No one except Alexa Reyes. Later that afternoon, she delivered meals to the Tactical Operations Center, where Commander Harrison was reviewing satellite imagery of an area called Thanlong, named for the distinctive dragon-like shape of the mountain ridge it traversed. The steel bridge there was a key strategic point controlling access to several valleys used by insurgent forces. "Meal service, sir," she announced quietly, placing the tray beside the maps. Harrison barely glanced up. "Just leave it there, thanks." Alexa set down the food but didn't immediately leave. Her eyes scanned the tactical map with practiced efficiency, noting patrol routes, observation posts, and terrain features. 15 seconds of observation gave her more information than most people would gather in an hour. "Is there something else?" Harrison asked, finally noticing her lingering presence. "No, sir. Sorry, sir." She backed away quickly, returning to her professional invisibility. Harrison shook his head slightly and returned to his planning. Just another support staffer with no understanding of combat operations. Not worth a second thought. What he didn't see was the quick sketch Alexa made in her notebook when she returned to the hallway, a perfect rendering of the bridge layout and surrounding terrain she had glimpsed on his table. That evening, Alexa sat in the back of the mess hall, eating alone as usual. The cacophony of conversation swirled around her without penetrating her bubble of isolation. She ate methodically, her eyes occasionally darting up to observe the SEALs at their table across the room. Each glance lasted no more than a second, long enough to gather information, not long enough to be noticed. A tray clattered down opposite hers, breaking her concentration. She looked up to find Gunnery Sergeant Frank Miller settling his 68-year-old frame into the seat across from her. With graying hair buzzed to regulation length and deep lines etched into his weathered face, Miller was the oldest active service member on the base, a living relic from another era who had refused retirement for so long that the military had simply given up trying to force him out. "Mind some company, Reyes?" he asked, his voice a graveled rumble from decades of shouting orders and breathing desert dust. "No, Gunny," she replied softly. "Not at all." Miller had been at FOB Horizon longer than anyone, a permanent fixture who had seen commanders and combat teams come and go. He ran the armory with ruthless efficiency and knew every weapon in the inventory better than its manufacturer. "Saw Davidson giving you grief again today," he said between bites of mashed potatoes. "That boy's got more mouth than brains sometimes." Alexa shrugged slightly. "It doesn't bother me." Miller studied her for a moment, his pale blue eyes seeing more than most. "No," he said finally. "I don't believe it does." He took a sip of water. "Request crossed my desk today. 17th time you have asked for a combat team assignment. 17th time it's been denied." Alexa's fork paused halfway to her mouth, the only indication that his words had affected her. "Brass says you're more valuable in logistics," Miller continued. "Says your organizational skills are too important to lose to a combat role." He snorted. That's what they always say when they have already decided where someone belongs. She resumed eating, her movements precise and controlled. I understand the military's need for effective resource allocation. Miller laughed, a rough sound like boots on gravel. That's a fancy way of saying you know they're full of shit. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Your father would have had some choice words about it, I imagine. Alexa's head snapped up, her eyes meeting his for the first time. You knew my father. A slow nod. Miguel Reyes, served with him during Desert Storm. Best damn shooter I ever saw. Miller watched as emotions flickered across her face, surprise, disbelief, curiosity. Wasn't sure if you'd remember me. You were just a kid the one time we met. At the base in Texas, she said, memory flooding back. You came to dinner, brought me a camo bandana. Still have it, she nodded. I do. Miller pushed his tray aside, folding his arms on the table. Your old man taught half the snipers who went through training in the 90s. Did you know that? Not officially, of course. Military never gave him proper credit, but those who knew, knew. He tapped a finger on the table for emphasis. Saved our entire unit during an operation I still can't talk about. 22 men walked out of that hellhole because Miguel Reyes could do things with a rifle that defied explanation. Alexa sat perfectly still, absorbing his words, her food forgotten. When I saw your name on the personnel roster, I couldn't believe it, Miller continued. Thought it had to be a coincidence. Then I saw you walking across the compound, and damn if you don't have his exact same way of moving. Silent, aware, always calculating. He paused. That's why they keep denying your transfer requests, you know. Someone up the chain knows who your father was. Knows what that might mean. What might mean? She asked, her voice barely audible. Miller's eyes narrowed. That maybe the apple didn't fall far from the tree. He pushed himself to his feet, gathering his tray. Come by the armory tomorrow. Oh, 600. I've got a new shipment of cleaning supplies that needs organizing. His emphasis on his last word made it clear that cleaning supplies meant something else entirely. As he turned to leave, he added quietly, Your father once told me the most dangerous person in any conflict isn't the one making all the noise. It's the one no one notices until it's too late. Alexa watched him walk away, her heart pounding in her chest. For the first time since arriving at Phoebe Horizon, she felt a spark of something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Dawn broke over the New Mexico desert, painting the landscape in strokes of amber and gold. 12-year-old Alexa Reyes lay prone on a rocky outcropping, her father's hunting rifle steady against her shoulder. The target, a tin can placed on a fence post, stood 500 yards away, barely visible to the naked eye. Breathe, mija, Miguel Reyes instructed, his voice gentle but firm. Feel the earth beneath you. Become part of it. Alexa inhaled slowly, allowing her body to settle deeper into the ground. The morning air was still cool, but soon the sun would turn the desert into an oven. They had precious little time before the heat distortion would make long-distance shooting impossible. What's the wind doing? Miguel asked. Alexa studied the desert scrub, noting the subtle movement of brush in the distance. 10 miles per hour from the northwest. Temperature, 68 degrees rising. Distance to target, 500 yards. And what does that mean for your shot? Alexa adjusted her scope minutely. Compensate 2 inches right for wind drift. Elevation adjustment for bullet drop over distance. Miguel nodded, pride evident in his eyes. The math is important, mija, but remember what I always tell you. The final shot must be perfect. She finished for him. It was his mantra, repeated during every lesson since she was old enough to hold a rifle. She took one final breath, held it, and squeezed the trigger. The tin can disappeared from the fence post in a flash of metal. Good, Miguel said simply, but the word contained volumes of approval. He rarely offered effusive praise. His daughter understood the significance of that single syllable. They collected their gear in companionable silence, the ritual as familiar as breathing. Miguel carried an ancient Barrett .50 caliber rifle, its wooden stock carved with the name Reyes. The weapon had been with him through Desert Storm and with his father before him in earlier conflicts. 3 generations of Reyes men had trusted their lives to that weapon. Why do we practice so much, Papa? Alexa asked, as they walked back to their weathered pickup truck. None of the kids at school do this. Miguel secured the rifles in their cases before answering. The desert teaches us things the school cannot, Mija. Patience, precision, respect. He gazed out at the harsh landscape. Out here, there is no room for error. One mistake can mean death. The desert does not forgive weakness, but it respects patience. Their small ranch sat 30 miles from the nearest neighbors, surrounded by mesas that stretched toward endless sky. The isolation suited Miguel, who had returned from the Gulf War with honors, but also with shadows behind his eyes that never quite disappeared. He had raised Alexa alone since her mother died in childbirth, a solitary man teaching his daughter the only things he truly understood: marksmanship, survival, and duty. Other fathers taught their daughters to dance or play sports. Miguel Reyes taught his daughter how to calculate wind resistance and bullet drop. "You don't need to be the fastest shooter, Mija," he would say during their lessons. "You just need to take the final shot, and that shot must be perfect." 17 years later, in the darkness of her quarters at Phobie Horizon, Alexa ran an oiled cloth along the barrel of that same Barrett 50 caliber rifle. The weapon lay disassembled on a cloth spread across her narrow military cot, each piece cleaned with reverent care. The Reyes carved into the wooden stock was worn smooth from decades of handling the letters deeper than when first engraved. 3 generations of hands had touched that wood, had trusted their lives to the precision of this weapon. Miguel had died when Alexa was 19, an IED explosion during a second tour as a civilian contractor in Iraq. The military had sent home his personal effects: the Barrett, a Purple Heart, and a piece of burned fabric from his tactical vest, stained with sand and blood. She reassembled the rifle with practiced efficiency, each piece fitting together with satisfying precision. The weapon was technically unauthorized on base. She had smuggled it in pieces within her personal belongings when deploying. If discovered, it would mean court-martial. The risk had never deterred her. Alexa opened a small notebook, adding to pages filled with detailed observations. The SEALs thought she was documenting supply requests. In reality, she was writing about them, their habits, their patterns, their strengths and weaknesses. She was studying them the way a biologist might study an unfamiliar species. From her notes, an outside observer would learn that Commander Harrison favored his left leg due to an old injury, that Corporal Williams tended to hesitate before making decisions under pressure, that Private Johnson had the best eyesight but struggled with target transitions, that Sergeant Davidson, for all his bravado, consistently miscalculated wind conditions during range qualifications. The next morning, she reported to the armory at exactly 0600 hours as instructed. Gunnery Sergeant Miller was already there, a cup of steaming coffee in his gnarled hand. "Right on time," he nodded approvingly, keying in the security code to unlock the armory door. "Come on in, Reyes." The armory was Miller's domain, a fortress within a fortress. Weapons of every description lined the walls and filled the racks, from standard-issue M4 carbines to specialized sniper systems. The air smelled of gun oil and solvent, a scent Alexa found oddly comforting. Miller locked the door behind them and led her to a small room in the back. A workbench occupied one wall, tools laid out with military precision. The opposite wall held a large topographical map of the surrounding region. "Your father saved my life," Miller said without preamble, setting his coffee down. "February 27, 91. Highway of Death, Kuwait. Our unit was pinned down by Republican Guard who'd survived the initial airstrikes. No air support available. No way out." He pointed to a scar that ran along his jawline. "Took shrapnel here. Was bleeding out when your dad appeared on our comms." Miller's eyes took on a distant look. He was 5 miles away. 5 miles. Weather conditions were shit. Visibility near zero from oil fires. But he found us, found the enemy, started dropping them one by one. The old Marine shook his head in wonder. 17 confirmed kills in under 12 minutes. Saved every one of us. Alexa listened silently, absorbing this new information about her father, details he had never shared. Operation was classified, still is technically. Your father never got official recognition for what he did that day. Never complained about it either. Miller fixed her with a penetrating stare. "That's why I knew it was you the moment I saw your name. Reyes, the family that serves without needing the glory." He walked to a locker in the corner, unlocking it with a key from around his neck. "Your old man was the best I ever saw because he understood something most shooters never learn. It's not about the weapon, it's about becoming invisible." He withdrew a case from the locker. even to your own side sometimes. Miller opened the case to reveal a disassembled sniper spotting scope far more advanced than standard issue. This isn't on any inventory. As far as the Army's concerned, it doesn't exist. He closed the case and handed it to her. Neither does this conversation. Alexa took the case understanding the implied message. Miller was providing her with tools and tacit approval, but also deniability for them both. I've scheduled you for supply runs to the observation post twice weekly, he continued. Routes will take you through ideal vantage points overlooking key terrain. For familiarization purposes only, of course. The ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. Military likes to keep track of weapons. People like us understand that the most dangerous weapon isn't the gun. It's the person holding it. Alexa nodded a silent agreement passing between them. Your father had a saying, Miller added, as he led her back to the main armory. The most important shot is the one no one sees coming. Alexa finished surprising herself with the memory. Miller's eyebrows rose. He told you that? No, she replied softly. I heard him say it once on the phone, late at night. He didn't know I was listening. Over the following weeks, Alexa divided her life at FOB Horizon into two distinct parts. By day, she remained the quiet, unassuming logistics specialist, counting supplies, delivering meals, maintaining inventory with meticulous care. The SEALs continued to overlook her, their casual dismissal becoming her greatest asset. By night, and during her newly assigned supply runs, she transformed into her father's daughter. She used Miller's spotting scope to study the terrain surrounding the base, mapping firing angles and calculating distances. She memorized patrol routes, identified vulnerabilities and security patterns, and documented everything in her growing collection of notebooks. The desert around FOB Horizon became a second home. She learned its rhythms, its dangers, its advantages. Where others saw only hostile emptiness, Alexa saw opportunity, places to hide, positions from which to observe unseen routes that allowed movement without detection. She never fired the Barrett. The risk of discovery was too great, and the distinctive sound would carry for miles. Instead, she practiced with it, disassembled running dry firing drills in her quarters after lights out. Her fingers learned every groove, every mechanism by touch alone. She could field strip the weapon blindfolded, reassemble it in complete darkness. One evening, as she delivered coffee to the Tactical Operations Center, she overheard Commander Harrison briefing his team on increased enemy activity near Thanlong Bridge. Intelligence reports light resistance in the area, he was saying, pointing to the map. Maybe 30 fighters, minimal equipment. Local warlord using the bridge to move supplies. Our job is to secure the position and hold it until Army units arrive to establish a permanent presence. Alexa's eyes narrowed slightly as she set down the coffee tray. Something about the intelligence assessment felt wrong. 30 fighters didn't align with the convoy patterns she had observed during her supply runs. The frequency and size of vehicle movements suggested a much larger force. Commander, she said before she could stop herself, may I ask a question about the operation? Harrison turned surprise evident on his face. The other SEALs looked equally startled, as if a piece of furniture had suddenly spoken. What is it, Reyes? The satellite imagery of Thanlong, she said, keeping her voice neutral. Has it been updated in the last 72 hours? Harrison frowned. Why do you ask? Weather patterns, sir. There was a significant dust storm 3 days ago. It would have affected visibility for aerial reconnaissance. The room fell silent. Davidson exchanged glances with the other SEALs. And how exactly would you know about classified weather data for operational areas? Harrison asked, his tone hardening. Alexa realized her mistake immediately. The supply convoy schedules were adjusted for weather conditions, sir. It was noted in the logistics briefing. Harrison stared at her for a long moment. Thank you for the coffee, Specialist Reyes. That will be all. Yes, sir. She retreated from the room, feeling their eyes on her back. Behind her, she heard Davidson's voice. Since when does the coffee girl offer tactical advice? Forget it, Harrison replied. We deploy at our 200 hours. Check your gear and get some rest. Alexa returned to her quarters, her mind racing. The commander had dismissed her concern, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with the intelligence assessment. 30 fighters didn't make sense. She opened her notebook, reviewing her observations from recent supply runs. Convoy patterns, dust signatures, evidence of expanded encampments in the canyon walls all pointed to a much larger force than reported. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. She quickly slid the notebook under her pillow before opening the door to find Gunnery Sergeant Miller. "Evening supply run to Outpost Bravo," he said loudly enough for anyone in the hallway to hear. "Commander needs these documents delivered ASAP." He handed her a sealed envelope. Once the door closed, he lowered his voice. "Harrison reported your little comment to Colonel Stevens. Wanted to know why a logistics specialist was asking about satellite imagery." Miller's expression was grim. "I covered for you, said you'd been helping me catalog weather impacts on supply routes. But you need to be more careful, Reyes." "The intelligence is wrong," she said urgently. "There's a much larger force at Thanlong than they're reporting." Miller nodded slowly. "I had the same thought, but Harrison won't listen to concerns from support staff, and the mission's already been approved at division level." He glanced at her footlocker, where she kept the Barrett disassembled. "What are you thinking?" Alexa met his gaze steadily. "That history might be about to repeat itself." Understanding dawned in the old Marine's eyes. "Your father's situation. Outnumbered unit. No backup." He shook his head. "This isn't Desert Storm Reyes, and you're not officially a combat specialist." "Neither was my father when he saved your unit," she countered softly. "Sometimes the most important person in a battle is the one no one expects to be there." Miller studied her for a long moment, conflict evident in his weathered face. Finally, he reached into his pocket and handed her a small device. "Encrypted radio, short range but secure. Frequency is preset." His voice dropped even lower. "Supply convoy leaves at year 100 1 hour before the SEAL team. Standard route takes it within 3 miles of Thanlong Ridge. Driver owes me a favor, won't ask questions if you tell him you're under my orders." Alexa took the radio, understanding the enormous risk Miller was taking by helping her. If anything went wrong, his career and freedom would be forfeit. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Miller straightened to his full height, suddenly every inch the Marine who had served with distinction for nearly 5 decades. "Because 22 men walked out of Kuwait alive, because Miguel Reyes made a choice, because sometimes the chain of command gets it wrong." He turned to leave, then paused. "And because your father would haunt me from the grave if I let his daughter walk into the same damn trap he saved us from." After he left, Alexa sat on her bunk, turning the radio over in her hands. The decision before her carried enormous consequences. If she was wrong, she would face court-martial and dishonor. If she was right but failed to act, men would die. She thought of her father's words spoken so many years ago in the New Mexico desert. The final shot must be perfect. She began to pack. The mountain darkness wrapped around Alexa like a familiar blanket as she moved through the supply convoy staging area. Her footsteps made no sound on the gravel, a skill honed through years of hunting in the New Mexico wilderness. The heavy case containing the disassembled Barrett rested against her back, concealed within a standard-issue medical supply pack. 3 supply trucks idled in the pre-dawn gloom, their headlights off to maintain operational security. Drivers performed final checks while logistics personnel loaded last-minute provisions. No one paid attention to the small figure moving purposefully between vehicles. In a war zone, invisibility was less about hiding and more about being so ordinary that others simply overlooked you. Alexa approached the lead vehicle, a rugged MRAP transport truck, modified for supply runs through hostile territory. The driver specialist Torres leaned against the hood, smoking a cigarette. "Gunny Miller sent me," she said quietly. Torres studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the passenger door without question. "We roll in 5. Alexa climbed into the truck, securing her pack between her feet. The interior smelled of dust diesel and the peculiar blend of sweat and gun oil that permeated everything in a forward operating base. She felt a momentary pang of guilt for involving Torres, but pushed the feeling aside. Some risks were necessary. As the convoy rumbled through the base's heavily fortified gate and into the open terrain beyond, Alexa reviewed her plan. The supply route would take them within 3 miles of the western approach to Thanlong Bridge. From there, she would break away from the convoy, find an elevated position with good sight lines to the bridge, and establish an observation post. She had no official orders, no authorization, and no backup. What she did have was absolute certainty that the SEAL team was heading into an ambush, and the skills to potentially save them when that ambush was sprung. "Never thought I'd be driving Reyes's kid around," Torres said, suddenly breaking the silence. His eyes remained fixed on the rough road ahead. "Your old man pulled my brother out of a bad situation in Fallujah. Lost his legs but kept his life because of your father. Alexa turned to study the driver's profile, surprised. You knew him. Of him, Torres clarified. Miguel Reyes was a legend among certain circles. Not the kind they write books about or make movies of. The kind operators tell stories about when no one else is listening. He tapped his fingers against the steering wheel. Gunny Miller doesn't call in favors unless it matters. Whatever you're doing, I don't want to know. Just tell me where to drop you. Ridge overlooking the Western Valley approach, she replied. I can walk from there. Torres nodded, no further questions asked. The convoy traveled in silence for the next hour, winding through mountain passes and dry creek beds. The landscape was brutal and beautiful in equal measure, harsh terrain sculpted by wind and time into formations that resembled the bones of ancient creatures. As they approached a turnoff point that would give Alexa access to the ridge overlooking Thanlong, Torres slowed the vehicle. Be about 2 minutes when we stop, he said. Routine maintenance check. Engine's been running hot. The convoy halted, and Torres made a show of inspecting the engine compartment. Under this cover, Alexa slipped from the passenger side and disappeared into the pre-dawn shadows without a word. By the time the convoy resumed its journey, she was already scaling the rocky terrain toward her chosen observation point. The climb was arduous, especially with the weight of the Barrett and additional equipment. Loose shale slid beneath her boots, threatening to send her tumbling down the steep slope. Alexa navigated the treacherous path with practiced movements, using natural handholds and avoiding dislodging rocks that might create noise. Reaching a suitable vantage point took nearly an hour. The position she selected offered excellent sightlines to the bridge while providing natural concealment among a cluster of boulders. More importantly, it placed her perpendicular to the likely direction of enemy fire, allowing her to observe and engage without immediately revealing her position. As the first light of dawn began to illuminate the valley, Alexa meticulously assembled the Barrett 50 caliber rifle. Each component slid into place with satisfying precision, the weapon coming together like a living thing awakening from slumber. She positioned the rifle on a stable rest and began to survey the terrain through her spotting scope. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. The valley and surrounding canyon walls teemed with activity, carefully concealed from casual observation. Camouflage netting covered heavy weapons emplacements. Natural caves had been fortified as sniper positions. At least 6 machine gun nests were positioned strategically to create interlocking fields of fire across the bridge. Alexa counted movement patterns, estimating force strength. Not 30 fighters as intelligence had reported. At least 200, possibly more, with significant heavy weapons. This wasn't a simple security force. This was an elaborate ambush, carefully prepared and patiently waiting. She reached for the encrypted radio Miller had then hesitated. Warning the SEALs now would expose her unauthorized position and likely result in immediate disciplinary action. Commander Harrison had already dismissed her concerns once. Would he listen now, or would he assume this was another unauthorized intrusion by support personnel? The tactical situation was clear. The bridge formed a natural choke point. Once the SEAL team was on it, fighters positioned at both ends would close the trap. Escape would be impossible. The canyon walls offered limited cover, and the 1,000-foot drop on the south side eliminated that as an escape route. Alexa turned back to her spotting scope, continuing her assessment. Enemy forces were well-equipped and disciplined. This was no ragtag group of local fighters. Their positioning showed sophisticated tactical understanding, suggesting training and leadership beyond typical insurgent capabilities. She pulled out her notebook, making rapid calculations for distance, wind speed, temperature, and humidity. These factors would affect bullet trajectory over the ranges she anticipated engaging. The Barrett was capable of effective fire beyond 1,500 meters, but the complex canyon environment created unpredictable wind patterns that would challenge even the most experienced sniper. As she worked, Alexa maintained awareness of her surroundings. Twice she froze as enemy patrols passed within 100 meters of her position, their voices carrying clearly in the morning air. They spoke a dialect she recognized from her time in country, discussing routine security matters and complaining about the cold night. The sun climbed higher, casting the canyon in stark contrast of brilliant light and deep shadow. Through her scope, Alexa could now see the full extent of the enemy's preparations. The ambush had been meticulously planned with redundant systems and multiple layers of security. Whoever commanded these forces was both patient and thorough. In her mind, she could hear Gunnery Sergeant Miller's voice from one of their conversations. In war, the person no one pays attention to is often the most dangerous. The enemy had prepared for an American Special Forces team. They had not prepared for a lone sniper watching from an unexpected position. Alexa checked her watch. The SEAL team would be approaching their insertion point soon. She made her decision. Instead of using the radio to warn them, potentially compromising both her position and their operation, she would remain silent and watchful. If the trap was sprung as she anticipated, she would be in perfect position to influence the outcome. She would become her father's daughter, in truth, the unseen guardian. The shadow no one expected. Her father's words echoed in her memory. The final shot must be perfect. Today, that perfection might be the difference between life and death for 8 American soldiers. As midday approached, the heat became oppressive. Alexa remained perfectly still, conserving energy and water. Movement would generate heat and increase her body's need for hydration. Stillness was both tactical necessity and survival strategy in this environment. Through her scope, she observed an increase in enemy activity. Fighters moved with greater purpose, checking weapons and positions. Their commander would be arriving soon, she realized. The pieces were falling into place. Then she saw him. A tall figure in black tactical gear emerged from a cave entrance on the far side of the canyon. Even at this distance, his bearing marked him as the leader. Fighters straightened their posture as he passed, a visible ripple of respect or fear. He moved with confident authority, inspecting positions and giving occasional instructions. Alexa adjusted her scope, focusing on his features. What she saw sent a chill through her body despite the desert heat. She recognized him immediately from intelligence briefings she had glimpsed in the Tactical Operations Center. Amir Zadran, a high-value target who had eluded capture for years. His presence elevated this ambush from a routine insurgent operation to something far more significant. American intelligence agencies had been hunting this man since he orchestrated the bombing of a diplomatic convoy 3 years earlier, killing 17 people, including the ambassador. Alexa carefully documented his movements, noting patterns and tendencies. If an opportunity presented itself, taking out Zadran would be a major intelligence victory. But her primary focus remained the safety of the SEAL team. Their lives took precedence over any high-value target. Hours passed in disciplined stillness. The shadow of the western canyon wall began to creep across the valley floor as afternoon waned toward evening. Weather conditions were deteriorating just as Alexa had predicted. Dark clouds gathered over the mountains, bringing the promise of a storm. Rain would complicate shooting conditions, affecting visibility and bullet trajectory. Her radio crackled to life. "Reyes, this is Miller. SEAL team is 20 minutes from your position. Weather report indicates severe storm front moving in. If you are still out there, conditions are about to get a lot worse. Be advised, Harrison convinced command to approve helicopter extraction from the bridge after they secure it. Bird scheduled for 2100 hours." The transmission ended without requesting confirmation, maintaining her operational security. Miller was letting her know the timeline without requiring her to break radio silence and potentially reveal her position. The news about helicopter extraction troubled her. If the SEAL team believed rapid extraction was available, they might push forward aggressively even when confronted with superior numbers. It would make them more vulnerable, not less. Thunder rumbled in the distance as the storm approached. Alexa made final adjustments to her calculations, accounting for the changing barometric pressure and increasing wind speeds. The coming rain would reduce visibility, but also potentially mask the sound of her shots, providing tactical advantage if she needed to engage multiple targets. Through her scope, she watched enemy fighters taking cover from the impending storm while maintaining their positions. They were well-trained and disciplined, not abandoning their posts despite deteriorating conditions. This further confirmed her assessment of the threat level. The radio crackled again. "Phoenix team approaching objective, 5 minutes out." Phoenix was the SEAL team's call sign. They were almost out of the bridge. The trap was about to be sprung. Alexa settled deeper into her firing position, her breathing slow and controlled. She was ready. Raindrops began to fall as the 8-man SEAL team approached the eastern entrance of Thanlong Bridge. Commander William Harrison led the column, his night vision goggles cutting through the growing darkness. The storm had arrived faster than predicted, turning what should have been a straightforward operation into a logistical challenge. Thunder crashed overhead, while lightning flashed across the mountains, briefly illuminating the steel and concrete span stretching 300 feet across the gorge. The bridge appeared exactly as briefed, a narrow structure with minimal cover connecting two sections of the valley that would otherwise be impassable. Harrison raised his fist, signaling the team to halt and take defensive positions. Something felt wrong. Years of combat experience had given him an intuition for danger that transcended intelligence reports and mission briefings. The back of his neck tingled with warning. "Eyes sharp," he murmured into his comm. "Davis Williams, check the support structures. Thompson Johnson, cover the far side. Davidson with me to recon the approach." The SEALs moved with practiced efficiency, each man knowing his role without need for detailed instruction. They had trained together for years, their movements as coordinated as a single organism with multiple limbs. Sergeant Scott Davidson crouched beside Harrison, scanning the bridge entrance with his rifle at the ready. "Sir, visibility is shit. This rain's getting worse." "I know," Harrison replied, squinting through his night vision. "But something else is off. You feel it." Davidson nodded grimly. "Too quiet. No movement, no sign of the enemy," Force Intelligence reported. "Because they're already in position." Harrison realized aloud, his stomach dropping. This is... Before he could complete the thought, the night erupted in gunfire. Muzzle flashes exploded from both ends of the bridge and from concealed positions carved into the canyon walls. The distinctive chatter of PKM machine guns mixed with the crack of sniper rifles in a deadly symphony. "Contact, contact," Harrison shouted into his radio as bullets whined overhead. "Multiple hostiles, all sides." The SEALs scrambled for cover, but the narrow bridge offered precious little protection. Concrete barriers designed to prevent vehicles from plunging off the sides provided the only real shelter, and those were spaced too far apart for effective defensive positions. Private Davis took a round in the shoulder and went down hard, his blood mixing with rainwater. Corpsman Williams dragged him behind a concrete barrier, already reaching for medical supplies. "How bad?" Harrison called out, firing controlled bursts toward muzzle flashes at the far end of the bridge. "Through and through," Williams reported. "He'll live if we get out of here, but he's combat ineffective." Harrison tried raising command on the radio, but static filled the channel. "Comms are jammed. They knew we were coming." He cursed under his breath. The intelligence failure was catastrophic. This wasn't a force of 30 fighters with minimal equipment. This was a sophisticated ambush with electronic warfare capabilities. Lightning flashed again, and in that stark moment of illumination, Harrison saw the full extent of their predicament. They were surrounded, outgunned, with their backs to a 1,000-foot drop. "Sir, what's the play?" Davidson asked, ejecting an empty magazine, while bullets sparked off the steel beam beside his head. Harrison looked at his team, 8 of America's finest warriors pinned down like rabbits in a trap. The enemy was advancing from both sides, tightening the noose with every passing second. For the first time in his 15-year career, Commander William Harrison had no answer. 300 yards away, hidden behind a rock outcropping, Alexa Reyes watched the slaughter unfold through her spotting scope. The SEALs had walked straight into the ambush, just as she'd feared. Now they were trapped in the middle of the bridge, caught in a perfectly executed crossfire. She had been right about everything. The enemy force size, their equipment, their tactical sophistication. But being right brought no satisfaction, only grim determination. The SEAL team had minutes, perhaps seconds, before they would be overrun. Through the pouring rain, Alexa could see the SEALs returning fire, but their ammunition wouldn't last long against such overwhelming numbers. Commander Harrison was trying desperately to coordinate their defense, but with limited cover and a wounded man, their options were rapidly diminishing. Alexa shifted her spotting scope, searching for Amir Zadran. If she could locate the enemy commander, taking him out might create enough confusion to give the SEALs a fighting chance. Finding a single individual in the chaos of battle was nearly impossible, but Alexa had spent hours studying the terrain and enemy positions. She knew where to look. There, on a protected ledge at the western end of the bridge, Zadran stood surrounded by bodyguards, observing the battle through binoculars. He was directing the final phase of the assault, his arm raised to signal fighters waiting in reserve positions. In 30 seconds, he would give the order for a full frontal assault from both ends of the bridge. The SEALs would be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Alexa moved from her spotting scope to the Barrett 50 caliber rifle. Rain streamed down her face as she settled into position, making final adjustments for the shot. The distance was 420 yards. Wind gusting at 15 miles per hour from the northwest. Elevation differential 80 feet. Humidity 92%. Temperature 68 degrees and falling. These factors and a dozen others would affect the bullet's trajectory. A miss would not only fail to stop the assault, but would also reveal her position to enemy forces. She would have one chance, one perfect shot. On the bridge, Private Johnson's voice cracked through the storm. "This is our grave, sir." Commander Harrison closed his eyes briefly, whispering what might have been a prayer for his men. Alexa saw Zadran raise his hand higher, ready to give the kill order. She took a deep breath, held it, and squeezed the trigger. The Barrett roared like thunder, its muzzle flash briefly illuminating the canyon wall. The massive rifle bucked against her shoulder with tremendous force, but Alexa rode the recoil with practiced discipline, her body absorbing and controlling the energy. Through her scope, she watched as Amir Zadran's head snapped back violently. He toppled backward, his raised hand falling limp at his side. His bodyguard stood frozen in shock, unable to comprehend what had just happened. For one impossible moment, the entire battlefield fell silent. 200 fighters froze in confusion. 8 SEALs stared in disbelief. Even the storm seemed to pause. Then chaos erupted again, but everything had changed. Without their commander, the carefully planned ambush dissolved into panicked confusion. Machine gunners abandoned their positions. Snipers fled their caves. The disciplined assault transformed into a mob of frightened men, their coordination shattered by the sudden, unexplainable death of their leader. On the bridge, Commander Harrison lifted his head above the concrete barrier, rain streaming down his face. "Who the hell fired that shot?" he whispered, scanning the darkness for their mysterious savior. Alexa didn't pause to celebrate. She worked the bolt action, chambering another round with practiced efficiency. Her breathing remained controlled and methodical. These weren't human beings in her scope anymore. They were math problems to be solved with ballistics and windage. She identified a machine gun nest that had the SEALs pinned down from the eastern approach. Range 390 yards, wind holding steady, slight adjustment for the new angle. She fired again. The Barrett's distinctive report echoed through the canyon once more. The machine gunner and his assistant disappeared from her scope, the heavy weapon falling silent. Harrison recognized the opportunity immediately. Davidson Thompson, eastern approach. Williams, get Davis on his feet. Johnson, western cover fire move. And the SEALs responded with immediate action, seizing the moment of confusion to begin fighting their way off the bridge. Their training took over muscle memory and drilled the responses, creating a coordinated withdrawal despite the chaos. Alexa continued her methodical support, each shot targeting a strategic threat. An ammunition truck exploded in a fireball when her third round found its fuel tank briefly turning night into day and revealing the stunned faces of men who had accepted their death and found themselves still breathing. A fourth shot took down a sniper's nest carved into the opposite canyon wall. A fifth eliminated a mortar team preparing to target the center of the bridge. Each shot was deliberate, precise, devastating. The enemy retreat became a full rout. Vehicles raced away through mountain passes. Fighters abandoned their weapons and fled on foot. Some tried to organize a counterattack identifying the general direction of the sniper fire, but Alexa had positioned herself too well. Natural rock formations protected her from direct observation, while the continuing storm and darkness obscured her muzzle flash. On the bridge, Sergeant Davidson paused during their fighting withdrawal, counting the shots. 12 rounds, he muttered in disbelief. 12 hits! Who the hell can shoot like that in these conditions? Harrison didn't respond, too focused on getting his team to safety, but the question burned in his mind. Who was providing this miraculous overwatch? It couldn't be official support. No such assets had been assigned to this operation. Yet someone with extraordinary skill was systematically dismantling the enemy force that had nearly killed them all. As the SEALs reached the eastern end of the bridge and established a defensive perimeter, Harrison keyed his radio once more, hoping the jamming had ended. "Unknown sniper, this is Phoenix Actual. Please identify yourself." Static answered him, but through his night vision goggles, he caught a glimpse of movement on the western canyon wall. A small figure methodically cleaning a rifle, as if what had just happened was simply another task to complete. Davidson followed his gaze. "Sir, is that looks like..." Harrison adjusted his optics, trying to get a better view through the rain and darkness. The figure was small, definitely not the build of a typical special operations sniper. As lightning flashed again, illuminating the canyon in stark detail, Harrison's breath caught in his throat. "Is that Reyes?" he whispered in disbelief. "The logistics specialist." Before Davidson could respond, Harrison saw a group of enemy fighters converging on the sniper's position. They had finally located the source of the devastating fire that had turned their ambush into a disaster. Reyes is compromised, Harrison barked into his radio. Enemy forces approaching her position from the south. We need to... A burst of gunfire erupted from the canyon wall, cutting off his words. Through his optics, Harrison watched as Alexa abandoned her position, moving with surprising speed and agility across treacherous terrain. She fired several pistol shots at her pursuers, creating space to maneuver. Sir, we have to help her, Davidson urged. Harrison assessed their situation rapidly. One man seriously wounded, limited ammunition, unknown number of enemy combatants still in the area. The tactically sound decision was to continue their withdrawal and call for emergency extraction once they cleared the jamming field. But the woman on that canyon wall had just saved his entire team from certain death. Williams secured Davidson, Johnson, Thompson with me. We're going to provide covering fire for our guardian angel. Harrison pointed to the eastern ridge line. That position should give us sight lines to her exfil route. Move. The four SEALs sprinted through the rain toward the elevated position, adrenaline overriding exhaustion. They established firing positions just as Alexa came under concentrated attack from a group of fighters who had circled behind her. Range 600 meters, Harrison calculated quickly. Wind from the west. On my mark, suppressive fire. 3, 2, 1, execute. 4 rifles opened up simultaneously, their coordinated fire forcing the enemy to seek cover. Alexa recognized the assistance, immediately using the opportunity to slip away down a narrow ravine that would be invisible to anyone unfamiliar with the terrain. Harrison watched her disappear into the darkness, a ghost vanishing into the storm. Cease fire, conserve ammunition, he ordered. She's clear. Davidson lowered his rifle, shaking his head in amazement. Sir? Was that really Reyes, the supply clerk? I think we've all seriously underestimated Specialist Alexa Reyes, Harrison replied grimly. And I want to know why. The storm intensified as Alexa made her way through the rugged terrain, putting distance between herself and the remaining enemy forces. Rain turned loose soil to treacherous mud that threatened to send her sliding down the steep inclines. Lightning revealed the path ahead in stark flashes, followed by darkness that seemed even deeper by contrast. She moved with purpose, navigating by memory and instinct. The Barrett had been impossible to bring with her during the hasty retreat, too heavy and cumbersome for rapid movement through difficult terrain. She had disassembled it quickly, scattering key components among the rocks. Without those parts, the weapon would be useless to anyone who found it. A bullet had grazed her left arm during the escape, leaving a burning furrow that bled steadily. The wound wasn't serious, but combined with physical exertion and exposure to the elements, it added to her growing exhaustion. Still, Alexa pushed forward. She needed to reach the rally point, where the supply convoy would pass on its return journey. Torres had agreed to watch for her at a specific location, but only until 2200 hours. After that, she would be on her own in hostile territory miles from the nearest friendly forces. The radio at her hip crackled. Shadow, this is Phoenix Actual. If you can hear me, we're clear of the bridge. Thanks to you, we all made it out. Extraction inbound for our position. Can provide coordinates if you need assistance. Over. Harrison's voice sounded strained but determined. He had used the call sign Shadow, an operational designation she'd never been given, created on the spot for a soldier who officially didn't exist in the combat operation. Alexa considered responding. The SEALs knew it was her now. There was no point maintaining communication silence, but acknowledging her presence and actions would create an official record that she had operated far outside her authorized role. Before she could decide, the radio crackled again. Shadow, this is Phoenix Actual. We observed you taking fire. Report status. Are you mobile? Do you require medical assistance? Over. The genuine concern in Harrison's voice surprised her. This was the same commander who had dismissed her earlier warning, who had never bothered to learn her full name in 3 months at FOB Horizon. Now he sounded like a team leader worried about one of his own. Alexa keyed the radio. Phoenix Actual, this is Shadow. I am mobile. Minor injury only, proceeding to extraction point. No assistance required. Over. A pause, then. Copy that, Shadow. Be advised, remaining hostiles are regrouping south of your position. Recommend you alter course northeast for 2 kilometers before resuming your planned route. We have air assets inbound that can provide distraction. Over. Understood, Phoenix Actual. Thank you for the cover fire earlier. Shadow out. Alexa changed direction as suggested, pushing through dense underbrush that clawed at her clothing. The physical discomfort was nothing compared to the emotional turbulence she now faced. After years of being overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated, she had revealed her true capabilities in the most dramatic way possible. There would be consequences. Court-martial was a distinct possibility. Unauthorized removal of a weapon from the armory, operating outside the chain of command, interfering with an official military operation. The list of potential charges was extensive, yet the alternative had been to stand by and watch 8 men die when she had the power to prevent it. No military regulation or fear of punishment would have been sufficient to make that choice acceptable. As she crested a ridge, the sound of helicopter rotors echoed through the canyon. 2 Blackhawks appeared in the distance, heading toward the SEAL's position. Extraction was underway. At least that part of the mission was proceeding as planned. A sudden movement to her right caught her attention. Alexa dropped to the ground instantly, her hand reaching for the pistol at her hip. Through the rain, she could make out 3 figures moving parallel to her position, approximately 50 meters away. Enemy fighters, likely part of the force Harrison had warned her about. They hadn't seen her yet, but their path would intersect with hers within minutes. Alexa assessed her options quickly. 3 armed men against a single shooter with a pistol in poor visibility, with limited ammunition. The tactical calculation was not in her favor. She keyed her radio again, keeping her voice at a whisper. Phoenix Actual, be advised, I have 3 hostiles on my 6 moving northeast. Currently undetected, but situation developing. Over. Harrison's response was immediate. Copy, Shadow. Can you evade? Attempting to do so, she replied, already searching for an alternate route. Stand by, Harrison said. Then to someone else, get those helicopters to make a pass over the southern ridge. I need a distraction. Moments later, one of the Blackhawks diverted from its approach to the SEAL position, banking sharply and roaring low over the area where Alexa had spotted the enemy fighters. The aircraft didn't fire, but the sudden appearance of an American military helicopter was enough to send the men scrambling for cover. Alexa used the distraction to slip away, putting a rocky outcropping between herself and the enemy position. She moved quickly, but carefully, using natural features to mask her movement, while maintaining awareness of potential threats. The helicopter made another pass this time, dropping flares that illuminated the area in harsh white light and further disoriented the fighters. It was a risky move. The aircraft was making itself a target to provide cover for her escape, but it worked. By the time the flares burned out, Alexa had put considerable distance between herself and the pursuers. Shadow Phoenix Actual. Hostiles appear to be withdrawing south. Are you clear, over? Affirmative, Phoenix Actual. Clear and proceeding to extraction. Thank you for the assist. That's twice today you've saved our asses, Harrison replied. Consider it partial repayment. Phoenix Actual out. Alexa continued her journey through the stormy night, eventually reaching the predetermined rally point just as the supply convoy appeared. True to his word, Torres had waited. He said nothing as she climbed into the cab of his truck, soaking wet and bleeding from her arm, a story written in her eyes that he deliberately chose not to read. The return journey to Phobie Horizon passed in silence. As the first light of dawn broke over the mountains, Torres finally spoke. Whatever happened out there, you should know the base is buzzing about a phantom sniper who saved a SEAL team from ambush. Command is scrambling to figure out who it was and how they knew to be in position. He glanced at her briefly. They're calling it a miracle. Alexa stared out the window at the harsh landscape passing by. Not a miracle, just preparation meeting opportunity. Torres nodded thoughtfully. Your father used to say something similar. As they approached the base perimeter, Alexa felt a strange calm settle over her. Whatever consequences awaited, she had made the right choice. 8 men were alive who would otherwise be dead. That knowledge was worth any price she might have to pay. The base appeared on the horizon, its concrete barriers and guard towers, a stark reminder that she was returning to a world of rules and regulations, a world where doing the right thing wasn't always the same as doing the authorized thing. What will you do now? Torres asked as they passed through the security checkpoint. Alexa considered the question carefully. Whatever comes next, she answered simply. Torres smiled slightly. Spoken like a true Reyes. Inside, the base organized chaos reigned. Medical teams rushed to meet incoming helicopters carrying the SEAL team. Intelligence officers huddled in tight groups trying to make sense of the mission's unexpected outcome. Senior officers barked orders as reports flooded in about the death of Amir Zadran, a high-value target whose elimination would reshape the regional power structure. Alexa slipped through the commotion unnoticed, making her way to the medical tent to have her arm treated. The medic who attended to her asked no questions about how a logistics specialist had sustained a bullet wound. In a war zone, some mysteries were best left unexplored. As the medic finished bandaging her arm, the tent flap opened. Gunnery Sergeant Miller entered, his weathered face revealing nothing as he approached her bed. "Heard you got yourself scratched up on a supply run," he said conversationally, loud enough for others to hear. Then lowering his voice, "Harrison is looking for you. Whole command staff is trying to figure out who saved their operation. CIA's already flying in to debrief the team about Zadran." Alexa nodded slightly, understanding the unspoken warning. "I need to file my supply inventory report." Miller's eyes flickered to her bandaged arm. "That can wait. You should rest." He paused, then added quietly, "Your quarters were searched while you were gone. Standard procedure when personnel don't return on schedule." Alexa felt a chill that had nothing to do with her wet clothing. Her notebooks, the Barrett components she had kept there. If they had found those? "Everything's in order," Miller continued, answering her unasked question. "I took care of it when the alert came through that the convoy was delayed." Relief washed over her. Miller had removed the incriminating items, protecting her once again. "Thank you," she said simply. Miller straightened to attention, his voice returning to normal volume. "Get some rest, specialist. That's an order." With a crisp nod, he left the tent. Alexa lay back on the narrow medical cot, exhaustion finally overtaking her. Whatever storm was brewing in the command center would find her soon enough. For now, she allowed herself a moment of peace, secure in the knowledge that she had honored her father's legacy. The final shot had been perfect. Alexa woke to the sound of hushed voices outside the medical tent. The light filtering through the canvas told her it was late afternoon. She had slept for several hours. Her wounded arm throbbed dully beneath the bandages, a persistent reminder of the previous night's events. "She's in there," someone said. "But she's been through hell, Commander. Maybe give her some time." "This can't wait." The voice belonged to Commander Harrison. "The General is personally requesting answers about our mysterious guardian angel." The tent flap opened and Harrison entered, followed by Sergeant Davidson. Both men looked exhausted, their uniforms still bearing traces of the previous night's battle. They had clearly come directly from a debriefing session, likely hours of intense questioning about the mission's unexpected outcome. Harrison approached her bed, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he simply stood there, studying her with new eyes, as if seeing her properly for the first time. Alexa met his gaze, steadily prepared for whatever came next, reprimand, arrest, or worse. Instead, Harrison extended his hand. "Thank you for saving my men, Specialist Reyes." The simple acknowledgement caught her off guard. She hesitated briefly before accepting the handshake, his grip firm and respectful. "I was doing my job, sir," she replied quietly. Davidson moved to stand beside his commander. "Your job is logistics, last time I checked." There was no malice in his tone, only genuine curiosity. "What you did out there, 12 shots, 12 kills in those conditions, that's not standard supply clerk training." Harrison pulled up a stool and sat beside her bed, leaning forward with hands clasped. "I've spent the last 6 hours in a room with the base commander, 2 intelligence officers from Langley, and a general who flew in specifically after hearing about a phantom sniper who eliminated Amir Zadran and saved a SEAL team from annihilation." His voice lowered. "I told them but had no idea who provided overwatch for my team. That the shots came from an unidentified position and that whoever fired them disappeared before we could establish contact." Alexa's expression remained neutral, though inwardly she felt a surge of surprise. Harrison was protecting her, lying to his superiors to shield her from the consequences of her unauthorized actions. "Why would you do that, sir?" she asked. Harrison exchanged glances with Davidson before answering. "Because something doesn't add up. A logistics specialist with sniper skills that surpass our best operators. 17 denied transfer requests to combat units, and a Barrett 50 caliber rifle that doesn't appear on any base inventory." He leaned closer. "I need to understand what happened last night, Reyes. Not for the brass, but for myself." Davidson nodded in agreement. "You knew it was an ambush. You positioned yourself perfectly. You identified and eliminated the highest value target first, then systematically removed every strategic threat in order of priority. Professional respect colored his voice. That's not luck or basic training. That's the work of an elite operator with years of experience. Alexa considered her options carefully. These men had seen her true capabilities. Denying the obvious would only erode any trust they might develop. Yet revealing everything could create complications for others, particularly Gunnery Sergeant Miller. My father was Miguel Reyes, she said finally. He taught me to shoot before I could read. The Barrett was his. Recognition flashed in Harrison's eyes. Miguel Reyes, Desert Storm, the Highway of Death operation. Davidson looked between them, confused. Sir, before your time, Sergeant, or Harrison explained, Miguel Reyes was a legend in certain circles. Unofficial sniper attached to special operations, saved an entire Marine unit during the Gulf War with shots that defied explanation. He turned back to Alexa. Your father was one of the finest marksmen who ever served, but his contributions were largely classified. How much did he teach you? Everything, Alexa replied simply. Our ranch in New Mexico was 30 miles from the nearest neighbor. We had a shooting range that went out to 1,500 yards. Every day after school through all weather conditions. He called it my real education. Davidson shook his head in wonder. And the military stationed you in logistics with those skills. A shadow crossed Alexa's face. Female, 5'2", not the profile they look for in combat snipers regardless of qualification scores. Harrison absorbed this information with a deepening frown. The intelligence about Thanlong Bridge you tried to warn us, it was flawed. How did you know? Supply runs gave me access to observation points overlooking key terrain features. I documented vehicle movements, camp expansions, patrol patterns. The evidence pointed to a much larger force than reported. Alexa shifted slightly, wincing as pain shot through her wounded arm. When command dismissed my concerns, I made a choice. You went outside the chain of command, Harrison stated, not as an accusation, but as a simple fact. I did what my father would have done, she countered. When lives are at stake, sometimes protocol has to take second place to what's right. Davidson nodded slowly. Can't argue with results. 8 men alive who should be dead. Amir Zadran eliminated after 3 years on the most wanted list. He looked at Harrison. Sir, what happens now? Harrison ran a hand through his short hair, the weight of command evident in his posture. By rights, I should report this. Unauthorized weapons operating outside mission parameters, circumventing the chain of command. He paused, measuring his next words carefully. But I watched you take those shots, Reyes. I've never seen anything like it, not in 15 years of special operations. The tent fell silent as Harrison visibly wrestled with his duty as a commander and his gratitude as a leader whose men had been saved. The brass wants to pin a medal on the phantom sniper who saved their operation and took out Zadran, he said finally. The CIA is calling it the most significant kill in the region in years. Intelligence is already tracking ripple effects through the insurgent network. He fixed Alexa with an intense gaze. But officially identifying you creates a problem. It means acknowledging that a logistics specialist operated without authorization and outperformed an entire SEAL team. Alexa maintained her composure, though her heart raced. I understand the position this puts you in, sir. Do you? Harrison's voice hardened slightly. Because right now I'm considering throwing away 20 years of military career to protect someone who, by all regulations, should be facing court-martial. He stood abruptly, pacing the small area beside her bed. The problem is I can't reconcile regulations with what I saw last night. You saved my men when no one else could. You made shots that our best snipers would call impossible. Davidson cleared his throat. Sir, if I may, there might be another option. Harrison turned to his sergeant. I'm listening. Special Operations Command has been pushing for more diverse skill sets in unconventional warfare roles, Davidson said carefully. This situation could be presented as a successful field test of embedded specialists operating autonomously. Harrison considered this for a moment. Reframe it as an authorized operation that was kept compartmentalized for security reasons. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Might actually work. And it would explain why there's no official record of Specialist Reyes' deployment to the area, Davidson added, plausible deniability built in. Harrison nodded slowly, then turned back to Alexa. How would you feel about a transfer to Special Operations Command? Reyes officially this time. The offer stunned her. After 17 rejected requests, the door to combat operations was suddenly wide open. It was everything she had worked for, fought for, been denied for years. Yet something held her back. A memory of her father's words, "The most dangerous person in any conflict is the one no one expects to be there." "With respect, sir, I think I might be more effective remaining where I am," she said quietly. Harrison's eyebrows shot up. "You want to stay in logistics after proving what you can do in the field?" "I want to operate where I'm needed most," Alexa clarified. "Sometimes that means being visible as a combat specialist. Sometimes it means being the shadow no one sees coming." Davidson exchanged a look of bewildered respect with his commander. "She's got a point, sir. The enemy prepares for known threats. They don't prepare for the logistics clerk with a Barrett 50 cal." Harrison studied Alexa with new appreciation. "Your father would be proud, Specialist Reyes." He straightened to his full height, decision made. "I'll inform a command that our unit receives support from an embedded special operations asset whose identity remains classified for security reasons. All documentation will reflect this official narrative." "Thank you, sir," Alexa said simply. "Don't thank me yet," Harrison replied, "because I'm also going to recommend you for additional training and clearance upgrades routed through unofficial channels. If you're going to continue operating in the shadows, you deserve proper support." He moved toward the tent exit, then paused. "One question, Reyes. The final shot on Zadran, 420 yards, 15 mph crosswind in the rain. How did you make that?" Alexa's eyes softened with memory. "My father always said, you don't need to be the fastest shooter. You just need to make the final shot perfect." Harrison nodded understanding. "Rest up. We'll talk more when you're recovered." He ducked out of the tent, Davidson following behind. Alone once more, Alexa lay back on her cot, considering the unexpected turn of events. Not court-martial or disgrace, but recognition and support, albeit secret recognition, shadow support. It felt right somehow, honoring both the letter and spirit of her father's legacy. Outside the base continued its rhythmic pace of operations, unaware that within its boundaries, a new kind of warrior had emerged. Not one who sought glory or recognition, but one who understood that sometimes the most important battles are fought from the shadows. As evening approached, Alexa rose from her medical bed, testing her strength. The wound in her arm would heal quickly, a minor injury compared to what might have been. She changed into fresh fatigues provided by the medical staff and stepped outside into the cooling desert air. The base looked different somehow, as if her perspective had permanently shifted. Or perhaps it was the way others looked at her that had changed. Word had clearly spread despite official silence. Soldiers who had previously looked through her now nodded respectfully as she passed. Conversations paused momentarily, resuming in hushed tones, after she moved beyond earshot. Her invisibility had vanished, replaced by something more complex, a kind of reverent uncertainty, as if no one quite knew how to categorize her anymore. Gunnery Sergeant Miller found her sitting alone outside the mess hall, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of crimson and gold. "Hell of a supply run," he said gruffly, lowering himself onto the bench beside her, with the careful movements of a man whose joints had endured too many desert winters. "Thank you for what you did," Alexa replied, "securing my quarters." Miller waved away her gratitude. "Least I could do. Your old man would have haunted me if I'd let his rifle get confiscated." He studied her profile in the fading light. "Harrison came to see me. Asked some pointed questions about unauthorized equipment and training. What did you tell him? Enough truth to be believable, enough fiction to protect us both." Miller's weathered face creased in a rare smile. "He's a good officer, Harrison. Smart enough to know when to follow regulations and when to look the other way." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "What happens now?" Miller asked finally. Alexa turned to face her mentor and friend. "I keep counting bullets by day. And by night." Her eyes reflected the last light of the setting sun, determination burning bright. "By night, I make sure every shot counts." 2 weeks passed. Alexa's arm healed quickly, and she resumed her duties in the logistics department with the same quiet efficiency she had always shown. To casual observers, nothing had changed. She still counted supplies, delivered meals, and maintained inventory with meticulous precision. Behind the scenes, however, a subtle transformation was occurring. Harrison had been true to his word in arranging specialized training disguised as routine administrative assignments. Tactical intelligence briefings appeared on her schedule, classified as logistics coordination meetings. Access to restricted satellite imagery arrived through secure channels officially for supply route planning. The CIA's investigation into Amir Zadran's death had concluded with a classified report attributing the kill to specialized assets operating under compartmentalized authority. The Phantom Sniper became a whispered legend among coalition forces, a ghost story told in hushed tones around makeshift fire pits and in crowded mess halls. No one officially connected Specialist Alexa Reyes to these stories. Yet knowledge spread in the way it always does in military circles, through meaningful glances, sudden silences when certain topics arose, and the unmistakable shift in how combat operators now treated the small, quiet woman who managed their supplies. Private Johnson, the youngest SEAL who had muttered, "This is our grave," on the bridge, took to carrying a spent .50 caliber shell casing in his pocket like a talisman. When asked about it, he would simply say, "Insurance policy, reminder that someone's watching over us." The true impact of that night at Than Long Bridge became apparent during a mission briefing 3 weeks after the incident. The SEAL team was preparing for an operation to clear a suspected weapons cache when Alexa entered with coffee for the planning staff. Instead of the dismissive acknowledgement she would have received before Harrison paused the briefing. "Specialist Reyes, before you go, what's your assessment of the terrain around Objective Delta?" The room fell silent. Combat operators turned to look at the logistics specialist with new interest. This was unprecedented, asking support staff for tactical input during mission planning. Without hesitation, Alexa stepped to the map table. "The satellite imagery is 72 hours old, sir. Recent weather patterns suggest the wadi here would be partially flooded, restricting vehicle movement to these elevated approaches." Her finger traced a path. "That creates a natural choke point ideal for defensive positions or potential ambush." Harrison nodded, unsurprised by her analysis. Recommendations. Alternative insertion from the northeast ridge would provide better cover and multiple escape routes if contact is made. Alexa pointed to several features on the map. "These rock formations offer concealment, providing for a small observation team to confirm conditions before committing the main force." Davidson, standing beside the commander, nodded in agreement. "Makes sense. We could position a two-man recon element 12 hours ahead of the main operation." "Make it happen," Harrison ordered. "And Reyes, I want your eyes on the satellite feeds when they refresh this afternoon. Flag any anomalies directly to me." "Yes, sir." She withdrew from the room, aware of the evaluating gazes that followed her exit. Later that day, as Alexa reviewed the updated satellite imagery in a secure communications room, Sergeant Davidson entered and closed the door behind him. "Found something interesting?" he asked, moving to stand beside her workstation. "Possibly." She indicated several pixels on the screen. "Heat signatures here and here consistent with recently occupied positions, not visible to standard observation." Davidson leaned closer, studying the thermal imagery with a professional eye. "Good catch. That changes our approach vector." He straightened, regarding her with frank curiosity. "You know, most of the team thought I was crazy when I started checking your logistics reports for tactical insights. Now they're asking to see them before operations." Alexa continued, working her expression neutral. "Just doing my job, Sergeant." "Your job." Davidson shook his head with a wry smile. 12 shots, Reyes. 12 perfect shots in conditions that would challenge our best marksmen. That's been bothering me for weeks." She looked up at him. "Why?" "Because I've studied marksmanship my entire career, trained with the best. What you did that night wasn't just skill. It was something else." His voice lowered. "I've requested your range qualification scores. They're good, but nowhere near what you demonstrated at Than Long." "Perhaps I perform better under pressure," Alexa suggested mildly. Davidson wasn't deterred. "Or perhaps you've been deliberately underperforming, staying invisible." He leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "The logistics specialist who counts bullets by day and makes them count by night." Their eyes met in silent understanding. Davidson wasn't accusing her of anything. He was acknowledging a kinship of purpose, a shared dedication that transcended job titles and official roles. "The team's heading out tomorrow," he said finally. "Operations been adjusted based on your input. Williams wanted me to give you this." He placed a unit patch on the desk beside her, the unofficial emblem of their SEAL team. Said you've earned it even if you can't wear it publicly. Alexa touched the patch lightly, recognizing the significance of the gesture. Thank you. Davidson nodded once professionally, then moved toward the door. Oh, and Commander Harrison wanted me to tell you there's a supply run scheduled to Observation Post Echo the day after tomorrow. Apparently, they're running low on medical kits. The slight emphasis on his words made the subtext clear. Another opportunity for her to operate in her unique capacity was being created. I'll make sure they get what they need, Alexa replied. After Davidson left, she returned her attention to the satellite imagery, scanning for details others might miss. Her father had taught her that victory often hinged on the smallest observations: a disturbed patch of earth, an unusual shadow, a pattern of movement that deviated from the expected. Miguel Reyes might be gone, but his lessons lived on in his daughter. Each time she spotted a hidden threat, each time her insights changed. In our operational plans, she honored his memory in the most meaningful way possible by saving lives. That night, as she performed maintenance on the Barrett in the privacy of her quarters, Alexa reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. The rifle that had been her father's now served a new purpose in her hands. The legacy of the Reyes family continued not in official commendations or public recognition, but in the quiet, crucial work of protecting those who would never know they had been saved. The next morning, she watched from the logistics warehouse as the SEAL team departed for their mission. Their vehicles kicked up dust that caught the early sunlight, golden clouds marking their progress until they disappeared beyond the perimeter. Harrison had paused briefly before boarding the lead vehicle, his gaze finding Alexa across the compound. No words were exchanged, no formal acknowledgement given. Simply a nod of profound respect between warriors who understood that some contributions would never appear in official reports. 24 hours later, the team returned successful and intact. The intelligence had been accurate, the approach vector secure, the operation executed without casualties. In the debriefing that followed, Harrison specifically credited the comprehensive logistics assessment that had identified potential ambush points and suggested alternate routes. On the surface, it was merely professional courtesy acknowledging support staff contributions. But to those who knew the truth, it represented something far more significant: the integration of a shadow asset whose value transcended traditional military categories. As the base settled into evening routine, Alexa completed her inventory reports with characteristic precision. Tomorrow would bring the supply run to Observation Post Echo, and with it another opportunity to serve in her dual capacity. The rhythm of this new reality felt right, a perfect balance between her official role and her true calling. Private Johnson approached as she was finishing her work, his young face solemn with unspoken emotion. Specialist Reyes, he began awkwardly, I never properly thanked you for what happened at the bridge. Alexa looked up from her paperwork, measuring her response carefully. Just doing my job, Private. No, he insisted quietly. It was more than that. When I said those words about it being our grave, I truly believed it. We all did. His hand unconsciously touched the pocket where he kept the shell casing. But then that first shot came and everything changed. She remained silent, allowing him this moment. My little sister back home wants to join the military, Johnson continued. I used to tell her to stick to something safe, support roles, administration, medical. Now, he shook his head slowly. Now I think maybe I don't know what safe means anymore, or what people are capable of when it matters most. Alexa considered his words thoughtfully. Your sister should follow her own path. Capabilities aren't defined by job titles or other people's expectations. Johnson nodded, a new understanding in his eyes. That's what I'm going to tell her. He straightened slightly. Anyway, just wanted to say thank you for those 12 shots. As he walked away, Alexa reflected on how a single night had transformed not just her own standing within the base, but potentially the future opportunities for others, like her people, whose talents might otherwise remain hidden behind assumptions and stereotypes. The nicknames started appearing within days of the Than Long operation. At first in whispers, then more openly among those who had been there. The Bridge Angel, Desert Ghost, the Phantom Sniper. But the one that stuck, spoken with equal parts fear and admiration throughout the base, was simpler. The Shadow, because that's what Alexa Reyes had always been, a shadow moving through their world, invisible, until the moment her invisibility became their salvation. 1 month after the events at Thanlong Bridge Forward Operating Base Horizon hosted a rare visitor. General Robert Chambers, commander of special operations for the entire region, arrived with minimal fanfare but maximum impact. His presence sent ripples of speculation throughout the base. Generals didn't make personal visits without significant reason. The official explanation was a routine inspection and operational review. The reality known only to a select few involved the Phantom Sniper incident that had eliminated a high-value target and saved an elite SEAL team from annihilation. Commander Harrison spent most of the day closeted with the general in the Tactical Operations Center, reviewing mission reports and satellite imagery. Sergeant Davidson was called in for several hours of questioning. Even Gunnery Sergeant Miller found himself summoned to provide expert assessment of the shot that had killed Amir Zadran. Throughout these proceedings, Alexa continued her normal duties, delivering coffee and supplies to the command center, as required, maintaining her role as the invisible support specialist. If General Chambers noticed the quiet logistics officer who efficiently managed the meeting requirements, he gave no indication. Late in the afternoon, Harrison found Alexa in the supply warehouse conducting inventory with her usual precision. "The general would like to speak with you," he said without preamble. "In private." Alexa nodded, setting aside her clipboard. "About the supply chain improvements I proposed last week." Harrison's expression remained carefully neutral. "Something like that." He led her toward the administrative building where the general had established temporary headquarters. "He's reviewed all the reports from Thanlong, official and unofficial." "I see," she replied quietly. "For what it's worth," Harrison added as they approached the building, "I've been completely honest with him about your role that night and about how essential your unique position has been to our recent operational successes." Before she could respond, they arrived at the general's temporary office. Harrison knocked once, then opened the door. "Specialist Reyes, sir, as requested." General Chambers was a legendary figure in special operations circles, 30 years of service, multiple combat deployments, and a reputation for valuing results over protocol when lives were at stake. He stood as Alexa entered, his weathered face impassive. "Thank you, Commander. That will be all for now." Harrison nodded and withdrew, closing the door behind him. Alexa stood at attention, awaiting whatever judgment was about to be rendered for her unauthorized actions. "At ease, Specialist," Chambers said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "Please sit." Alexa complied, maintaining perfect posture despite the apparent informality of the invitation. The general studied her for several long moments before speaking again. "Miguel Reyes was a friend of mine," he said finally. "We served together in Desert Storm. Different units, but our paths crossed during certain sensitive operations." He leaned back in his chair, eyes never leaving her face. "When I heard about a mysterious sniper eliminating Amir Zadran with a Barrett 50 caliber from 400 yards in a rainstorm, I had the strangest sense of déjà vu." Alexa remained silent, neither confirming nor denying anything. "Your father made a similar shot in Kuwait," Chambers continued. "Different circumstances, but the same impossible skill." He reached for a folder on his desk. "I've reviewed your service record. 17 rejected transfer requests to combat units. Exemplary performance evaluations, but always limited to support roles. And now this situation at Thanlong Bridge." He opened the folder, revealing the classified reports from the operation. "Commander Harrison speaks very highly of your contributions both during the incident itself and in subsequent operations where your insights have proven invaluable." Chambers closed the folder with deliberate care. "He's placed himself in a difficult position by protecting you." "I never asked for his protection, sir," Alexa replied evenly. "No, I don't imagine you did." The general's expression softened slightly. "You're very much your father's daughter in that respect. Miguel never asked for recognition either. Just did what needed doing regardless of protocol or personal risk." He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the base beyond. "The Pentagon has become very interested in expanding unconventional warfare capabilities, particularly in utilizing overlooked talent in non-traditional roles." Turning back to face her, he added, "Your actions at Thanlong have provided a compelling case study." Alexa processed this information carefully. "Are you saying my unauthorized operation is being used to justify new military policies, sir?" "I'm saying that sometimes the system catches up to reality rather than leading it." Chambers returned to his desk and sat down. Official channels are now being created for exactly the kind of dual-role specialist you've already become. Operatives who maintain cover identities within support functions while possessing advanced combat capabilities. He slid a document across the desk toward her. This is a formal commendation for your actions at Thanlong Bridge. It will be entered into your record with appropriate security classifications. It won't be public, but it will exist where it matters. Alexa glanced at the document but made no move to take it. With respect, sir, recognition isn't what I'm looking for. I know that, Chambers replied with unexpected warmth. That's precisely why you deserve it. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the desk. I'm also offering you a choice specialist raise. You can transfer to formal special operations training, sniper school, advanced tactical instruction in the works. With your skills and combat experience, you'd excel in the program. And the alternative, sir, you can remain exactly where you are. Continue your logistics duties as cover for more specialized operations. Commander Harrison has requested permission to utilize you as a shadow asset for high-risk missions. I'm inclined to grant that request. Alexa considered the options carefully. Formal recognition and training would fulfill the goals she had pursued through 17 rejected transfer requests. Yet something about maintaining her current dual identity felt right, honoring both her father's legacy and her own unique path. I believe I can best serve by remaining in my current position, sir, she said finally, with the understanding that I would continue to provide specialized support as needed. Chambers nodded, unsurprised. Very well. Effective immediately, you are officially assigned to logistics duties at FOB Horizon. Unofficially, you will receive the designation Specialist Operative with authorization to support combat operations at Commander Harrison's discretion. He pushed another document forward. Your security clearance has been upgraded accordingly. Thank you, sir. The general stood, signaling the end of their meeting. Your father would be proud, Specialist Reyes, not just of your skills, but of your understanding that the most valuable service often happens in the shadows, unrecognized by most, but essential nonetheless. As Alexa rose to leave, Chambers added one final thought. The shell casing from the Zadran shot. What happened to it? Private Johnson has it, sir. He carries it as a kind of reminder. Chambers smiled slightly. Fitting. In my experience, the best memorials aren't made of stone or metal on public display. They're the small personal tokens that change how people see the world. After leaving the general's office, Alexa walked slowly back to her quarters, absorbing the unexpected validation of her unconventional path. The system that had repeatedly rejected her combat potential had now created a special designation to accommodate her unique capabilities. It was an irony her father would have appreciated. That evening, Commander Harrison found her sitting outside the mess hall, watching the sunset paint the mountains in familiar shades of amber and gold. I hear you turned down formal sniper school, he said, taking a seat beside her. Some skills are better learned outside conventional channels, she replied. My father taught me that. Harrison nodded, understanding. General Chambers has authorized me to incorporate your specialized support into future mission planning. Officially or unofficial, as it were. I'm at your disposal, Commander. No, he corrected gently. You're not at my disposal. You're a full member of this team now with equal voice in operational decisions. Your cover remains logistics, but your role extends far beyond that. Alexa absorbed this new reality with quiet satisfaction. After years of being dismissed and overlooked, she had found her place not by conforming to the system's expectations, but by demonstrating her value so undeniably that the system had adapted to her. There's something else, Harrison continued. The team wanted to do something to acknowledge what happened at Thanlong. Nothing public or official, but meaningful. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, offering it to her. It was a shell casing from a .50 caliber round, polished to a mirror shine and mounted on a simple wooden base. Engraved on the base were 13 words. One shot can open the way. The Shadow Thanlong Bridge, Afghanistan. Private Johnson donated his souvenir for the cause, Harrison explained. Said it was only right that it come back to the person who fired it. Alexa accepted the memento, emotion threatening to break through her composure. Thank you, Commander. Please thank the team for me as well. Harrison stood to leave but paused. One question I've been meaning to ask. That night on the bridge, after your first shot took down Zadran, you made 11 more. All perfect. Why exactly 11 more? Alexa looked up from the shell casing in her hand. Because that's how many strategic threats remained that could have prevented your team's escape. Not 12 targets of opportunity, 12 specific threats prioritized in order of danger to my men. Harrison shook his head in quiet amazement. Remind me never to play chess with you, Reyes. After he departed, Alexa remained watching the sunset, turning the shell casing over in her hands. The polished brass caught the fading light, transforming it into a small flame that seemed to burn with its own inner fire. In that moment, she felt her father's presence more strongly than she had since his death. Not as grief or loss, but as continuation. The skills he had taught her, the values he had instilled, the legacy he had left behind, all lived on through her actions. The next morning, Alexa resumed her logistics duties with the same quiet efficiency she had always shown. To casual observers, nothing had changed. She still counted supplies, maintained inventory, and delivered coffee to operational briefings. But now when she entered a room, conversations shifted subtly. Combat operators nodded respectfully. Intelligence officers sought her perspective on terrain assessments. Command staff incorporated her observations into mission planning. The logistics girl had become something else entirely, a shadow operative whose true value lay in being simultaneously visible and invisible, recognized yet deniable, ordinary yet exceptional. 2 days later, a small addition appeared in the base's trophy case. Next to medals for valor and unit commendations sat a polished 50 caliber shell casing on a wooden pedestal. No name accompanied it, no explanation provided. Yet every soldier who passed knew its significance. The display became an unofficial pilgrimage site. New arrivals at Phobie Horizon were brought to see it as part of their orientation. Veteran soldiers would pause there during their daily routines, touching the glass case with something approaching reverence. For Alexa, the memorial represented something more personal, not recognition or glory, but a reminder that heroism often wore unexpected faces. That capabilities couldn't be judged by appearances or titles. That sometimes the most important person in any conflict was the one no one expected to be there. As she prepared for another day of dual service, counting bullets by day, making them count by night, Alexa thought of all the other potential guardians within the military's ranks. How many others with exceptional skills remained hidden in support roles, their talents untapped due to assumptions and stereotypes? Perhaps her story, though officially classified, would inspire commanders to look more carefully at the people around them, to recognize that heroes didn't always announce themselves with obvious credentials or conform to traditional expectations. Sometimes they moved quietly through the background, invisible until the moment their invisibility became salvation itself. 1 year later, Forward Operating Base Horizon had transformed in subtle but significant ways. The culture that had once rigidly separated combat operators from support personnel had evolved into something more integrated and respectful. Female service members in particular found new opportunities opening as commanders reconsidered traditional assumptions about capability and potential. The story of the Phantom Sniper had entered military folklore, spreading through unofficial channels despite its classified status. Different versions circulated, some more accurate than others, but all carrying the same essential message: never underestimate anyone based on appearance or job title. Sergeant Scott Davidson, now promoted to Master Sergeant, incorporated this lesson into training for new arrivals. The person serving your meals today might save your life tomorrow, he would tell them. Treat everyone with the respect you'd give a fellow operator, because you never know who's watching your back when it matters most. Commander Harrison had moved on to a new assignment at the Pentagon, where he was rumored to be developing specialized programs for unconventional warfare assets. Before departing, he had ensured that Alexa's unique position was firmly established and protected by appropriate authorization. Gunnery Sergeant Miller remained at FOB Horizon, still running the armory with ruthless efficiency despite repeated attempts to force his retirement. Under his gruff mentorship, a small cadre of dual-role specialists had begun to emerge, support personnel with combat capabilities who operated in the shadows when needed. As for Alexa Reyes, her official status remained logistics specialist. Her daily routine still involved inventory management, supply coordination, and resource allocation. She still moved quietly through the base, her demeanor unassuming, her presence often overlooked by those who didn't know better. But those who did know better, those who had seen what happened at Thanlong Bridge or benefited from her shadow operations, since regarded her with a respect that transcended rank or position. They understood that beneath the unassuming exterior lay a guardian whose vigilance had repeatedly meant the difference between life and death. Private Johnson, now Sergeant Johnson, still carried a 50 caliber shell casing as his personal talisman. He had given the original to create Alexa's memorial, but had recovered another from the site of a subsequent operation where her precision fire had once again saved American lives. He eventually gave the shell casing to his younger sister when she graduated from Army Ranger School, the first woman in their family to earn the tab. "This came from someone who showed me that heroes don't announce themselves," he told her during the ceremony. "They just show up when you need them most." The Barrett, 50 caliber rifle that had created this legend, disappeared from official records. Some said it was destroyed in a subsequent battle. Others claimed it had been sent home to Alexa's family ranch in New Mexico. A few believed she still carried it, that somewhere in the world the phantom sniper was still protecting soldiers who would never know her name. But the shell casing remained in the trophy case, polished by countless hands that touched the glass in passing. A physical reminder of an impossible night when death had been cheated by skilled courage and perfect timing. Engraved on its base in letters so small they were barely visible was a single word that Alexa had requested be added: Papa. Because every hero stands on the shoulders of heroes who came before, and every perfect shot is the culmination of countless hours of preparation, patience, and love passed down through generations. On a quiet evening, exactly 1 year after Thanlong Bridge Commander Nathan Blackwood Harrison's replacement as SEAL team leader approached Alexa as she sat outside the mess hall in her customary spot. "We've received intelligence about a situation developing near the Pakistani border," he said without preamble. "High-value target, heavily guarded compound, extreme range considerations." Alexa looked up from her notebook where she had been making calculations for a supply requisition. "Sounds challenging. Intelligence suggests a 72-hour window before the target relocates," Blackwood continued. "Standard approaches would telegraph our intention and spook the target. We need something unconventional." "I assume you have a plan, Commander." Blackwood held her gaze steadily. "We need a shadow." Alexa closed her notebook with deliberate care. "Then you shall have one." That night, as she prepared her equipment for the coming operation, Alexa thought about the strange journey that had brought her to this point. The path had not been easy or straightforward, but it had led to a place where her unique capabilities could serve the greater good. Her father had taught her that the final shot must be perfect. What he hadn't told her, what she had discovered for herself, was that sometimes the most important shots were the ones no one else knew had been taken. As she checked her gear one final time, Alexa's thoughts turned to the legacy she was creating. Not one of public recognition or official accolades, but of lives preserved and threats neutralized before they could manifest. The best kind of guardian was the one whose protection was so complete that those being protected never realized the danger they had faced. The next morning, Alexa filed her standard logistics reports, arranged for coverage of her regular duties, and quietly joined the convoy heading toward the Pakistani border. To any observer, she was simply another support specialist accompanying a routine patrol. In reality, she was the shadow moving once more into position to protect those who would never know her name. Some angels, after all, prefer to remain invisible.